Hey everyone, some of you may notice I've been using Improvised Cordage for my friction fire for a while, though most of it has not made it onto YouTube. In fact, I've got some great footage of the first time I had a go of it that I'd like to show you.
Nice shirt, loser.
What do you mean? Don't do that to me. And the reason why I've been doing that is I want to develop practical survival skills. Ideally, I would always have a sufficient and reliable means of making fire, but if I didn't have that and I didn't have paracord or any kind of pre-made cordage, what would I do? Now, I've always figured, you know what, I'd make it out of my clothing. But I had never tried that before. So, I decided to start trying it. And I learned a few things that I thought I would like to share with you. Now, what I've been using is a strip of cloth from the trim of my t-shirt. I use that because it's one of the longest continuous strips, and that little bit overlaps with my pants normally, so I should hopefully still be covered even after taking that strip off. And I take that and I twist it up. I don't braid it or anything, I just twist it into a piece of cord and tie it on my bow. Now, first thing I tried was arm sleeves. Problem with this was I had to tie knots in it because they weren't quite long enough, and those knots, they just really get in the way. And the little bits sticking out, they can easily get tangled, and you get your spindle tangled in your cordage, and it stops you while you're trying to get your ember. That's not good. Some of you are probably thinking, why not primitive cordage? Well, the only primitive cordage I've ever made was really weak. So weak that I wouldn't really even bother trying to do a friction fire with it. And that was a little bit of a tiny bit of cordage I made just to test it out, trying to make cordage out of a stringy type of paper bark. Now, I don't know a whole lot about primitive cordage, but I know enough from experience in making it that I really like pre-made cordage. For me as a novice, making cordage is quite time consuming, and the end result isn't very strong. So that's just me and what resources I have. More importantly, you need the right resources to make that cordage. That's a variable. So if I really needed a fire before nightfall, I would need a lot of time and the right resources to make cordage. And people do bow drill with primitive cordage. And I can't really comment on that because that's not something I've done. My cordage skills aren't very high. But if I really needed that cordage to make a fire, I feel that my best possible option in a lot of situations would be to make improvised cordage. Now, I may not always have paracord on me. Even if I don't have my backpack, I'm still likely to have clothing on me. So that's what I've been testing out to see, can I get a friction fire going with just some cutting tools. I've been carrying a Leatherman Sidekick and an Opnil 12 and using improvised cordage made from a strip of cloth from a t-shirt that thick. You know, like that thick. I think it's like 2 inches, but I don't know, I'm not good at estimating sizes like that. But yes, I can get it. I can get it to work. Some things to look out for. When you get those frayed ends, they can tangle. So I just kind of smooth them out so it's not frayed and, you know, binding and tangling up around the spindle. You know, if it tangles around the spindle, you know, like with these knots, the spindle's there and that's tangled around there. Where's it spinning? There's a problem, isn't it? So one of my tips I've found is try to avoid it being frayed. You know what? Honestly, I believe that a strip of cloth wound up into a piece of cord is also better than anything I could create primitively with my skill sets. And I've been using the same piece for about for the 5 or 6 days of friction fire. That's not complete days, but I've had some days where I've been doing really badly at friction fire, so I've been putting it under a lot of use, and I've had days where I've just come out and quickly whip up an ember. So it did last quite a while, and it only ended up breaking in the end because I got lazy and tried to stretch it out to save me having to retie it, and then ended up getting it to start tearing. And even then it lasted a while after it had a little tear starting. Eventually that tear caused it to break in half. But then I tied those two pieces together and I kept using it. I just couldn't use the full length of the bow. And I ended up I accidentally got my spindle to light. It had a pith center. The hot dust went up into the pith center and ignited the spindle. It happened. I set my spindle on fire with friction. Even after it broke, I still got my spindle igniting, plus a good sized ember. So if I was in a survival situation, and I did not have pre-made good cordage, I'd definitely go with improvised cordage. And I can now say that as a piece of advice because it's now something I've actually tested. But now I know that I can get a fire going with a bit of cloth cut from my shirt. But I did learn a few things about using improvised cordage made from a bit of cloth. The first thing I learned was you want as long of a continuous strip as possible. Whenever you have to go past a knot like that, you run the risk of it getting tangled, binding up, and that's stopping you while you're doing your bow drill, preventing you from getting your ember. That's not good. Next thing I learnt was don't try to pull on it because you can tear it. Also learnt that it does stretch. Yes, it's a piece of cotton. It stretches after you've used it for a while. Not that big of a deal. I just had to reattach it. It's a piece of cotton. It'll stretch, which caused a bit of a problem for me. I had a couple of hours trying to figure out what was wrong with my bow drill. Why couldn't I get this to work? It's not spinning properly. It's the cordage I was using had stretched, didn't have the right tension, so I retied it. Boom. I then got an ember relatively easily. So yeah, that's something you gotta look out for. This cordage will stretch if it's a strip of cotton like what I used. But I really do believe that this is a lot stronger than anything I could make out here, and would be what I would go for in a survival situation, as opposed to trying to look around for the right materials to make primitive cordage, which honestly I don't believe would be as strong, though I can't really say that with certainty because I have not had that much experience with primitive cordage. But I've been told by a lot of people that it is really difficult to make cordage good enough for repeated use of bow drill, whereas my improvised cordage made from a strip of cloth ended up being used multiple times for bow drill practice, so I don't have to go looking around for it. I don't run the risk of not finding the correct plants. I get stronger cordage from my shirt trimming than I could with my skill sets make out here, though I will stress I am not skilled at making primitive cordage, so access to materials is more reliable. The end result for me, at least, is stronger, and it would save me a lot of time. So yeah, I just wanted to share what I've learnt and have tested with all of you, because it's one thing to say that you believe you could get a fire by friction going with a piece of cloth cut from your shirt. It's another thing to go out and actually practice it. Alright everyone, I hope you've learnt something from this rambling. I would encourage people to have a go at using a strip of cloth. Please don't use your good clothes. If you really want to use a strip of cloth cut from a t-shirt, I would suggest going to a second-hand shop and buying a really ugly shirt that you wouldn't feel bad about taking a bit of cloth off of, as long as it's a really cheap, ugly shirt, not your good clothing. But if anyone wants to have a go at using improvised cordage for a friction fire, I would love to see it as a video response. Alright everyone, have a good one.